Good evening, and welcome to a very spooky episode of Chatz in a Pickle, a podcast where we cover non-struck work in the world, the realm of pop culture. I'm your haunted guest, Alan, and I'm joined as always by an absolute ghoul of a guy. It's Magellan. Hello.
Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm a singing ghoul and I'm eating some flan. It's as jiggly as I can be on Halloween.
I love the energy. It's giving Death Becomes Her. It's giving Halloween Town 2, Calabar's Revenge. It's giving Smart House. It's giving... Listen up, Magellan.
What's that? The one with the guy who's like a meme and we love him.
What? Give me more. Give me a little more.
What's his name? Like,
Give me a little more.
We love him. Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Timothy Curry.
Tim Curry. What's the Halloween song that he's in?
Anything can happen on Halloween. Your dog can turn into a cat. That's from also starring a young Fairuza Balk. Fun fact.
I don't know who that is, so I'm not having much fun with that fact.
She's the one who takes William's virginity. She's also in... I've never seen a movie before. I've never seen it.
No. Oh, no.
I'm bleeping all of that. I'm bleeping it with like spooky sounds. It's all going to be spooky sounds.
Oh, no.
Never mind. But you guys enjoy the spooky bleeps. Go ahead.
Yeah. For all the teachers out there, you probably know about all these YouTube channels that make bank off of being like timers, because you got to put timers in your slides or whatever.
Right. Yep.
And I keep doing this bit every day, and there are these two kids who sit in the front row in our earliest period of the day, where there's like a spooky timer that when you play it, it plays like creepy music, and every time I play it, I go like, huh, huh. And nobody else notices it, and it's really fun.
Is it 10-minute Halloween bats timer? Spooky electronic piano tones at the end.
Does that have like a moon in the background and stuff?
Oh no, that's 15-minute Halloween timer.
Yeah, it's it's the 12-minute one of those.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh man, it is spooky season. People ask us. Chat's listeners asked us. They're like, "Whoa, when are you guys gonna do spooky stuff this month? What's going on? You guys did Moving Out? That's not a scary game." I'll have you know, listener, that the process of moving out of a home is
terrifying.
Very scary.
Yeah,
horrifying. One might even say.
Yeah.
But we're leaning all the way into it, since this is, in fact, the Chat's episode that comes out 2 days before Halloween. God, I'm so excited for you guys. And it's my pickle this week. So I'm just enjoying this moment, right, where I get to host and control the tenor of the episode and, put on a mask, a character, and dictate the story to you. But before that, just quick check. John, it's pickle check time.
Pickle in the fridge. I got a pickle in the fridge. I got my wife all over me. But there's a pickle in the fridge. When my wife is at work, I touch the pickle in the fridge. When my wife is at home, I do not touch the pickle in the fridge. Cause there's a pickle in the fridge. I'm gonna punch you with my teeth.
Alan, did you crunch any pickles with your teeth this week?
Oh, I certainly did, Mr. Magellan. I was at my parents' this weekend and for, a baptism, and I think it was Sunday morning? Yeah, or Sunday afternoon. I had a hamburger and I was like, could I get a pickle with this? And my mom was like, yeah, and she had the same Clausen jar that she gave me. It's like I was donated it, like a cursed object, but hers was much older. So I brought up the concern, right, from last week of like, hey, mine says it's expired. And she was like, they're pickles. They don't expire the same way. Like eventually, yeah, they'll be gross, but they just get more and more pickly and you're fine. Because she was like, I've had this one for weeks. And like after its expiration, it's not an issue. So I'm keeping my pickles around the house. I did crunch into a pickle with my teeth. And I'll probably be having a pickle tomorrow because I'm home from work. I'm working from home.
I'm home from work.
I'm home from work. You know how when you know what the right thing is to say, but your brain will only want to say it wrong?
Yeah.
That's
My
what
brain does that
happened
a
there.
lot where it'll be like two different things that would make sense, but the combination does not.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It refuses to connect.
Yeah.
Did you have a pickle this week?
Okay, so here's what happened. So I went to this really fun event. I'm kind of tipping the hand of one of my several Chatsums, but I went to an event that I'll talk about later at the Nighthawk Cinema in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And I was there with our roommates and with Amanda, and we got this like chicken sandwich that came with a quarter of a pickle, like a classic spear that you get on the side of a sandwich.
Sure.
And Amanda and I were sharing the chicken sandwich. So I look over at the pickle, and in my head, I'm like, that's my pickle check pickle right there. Like, this is my opportunity to have something to talk about on the podcast. And then I kind of like ate the sandwich a bit, ate some of the fries, had a drink of whatever I was drinking, and then I look back over and it's gone. It wasn't there anymore, and I didn't have a bite of it. And it's okay because there's an unspoken understanding between me and Amanda that if we're sharing something and it has a pickle with it, that she'll eat the pickle.
Yeah.
But I needed to advocate for myself in that moment and say like, look, this is for my art. I understand.
She let you?
Well, no, I didn't even. It all happened so quickly,
I see. That's beautiful.
So maybe before the end of Chats and a Pickle, I'll eat a pickle. We'll see.
You gotta just eat one pickle, man.
Yeah.
I believe in you. I believe the time is soon. If you told her, hey, I know you have a jar of pickles in the fridge. Can I have one pickle so that I can complete the pickle check? We'll be free. She will gladly say yes. I will text her right now and be like, please let your mans have one pickle.
No. That's too easy. That's too easy. I want to encounter a pickle.
Okay. When your wife is
in the wild.
Yeah, it's kind of like what is it similar to? Oh my god, you know what I'm thinking of? It's like Whamageddon. Like, you don't want to just play the song.
Yeah, right.
I just explained to Whamageddon to my roommate a few weeks ago. It's like, hey, heads up, in December when I'm like really weird.
Yeah, you're gonna play this game with me in a month or so.
If you're like, if we're ever out in public and you're like, why is he covering his ears? And it's like, that's why. I'm not sick. I'm sick, but I'm sick with Whamageddon. Anyways, I think it's time for our main event. Does that sound like a plan?
It does. Let's do it.
So in honor of spooky season and in our continued effort to not cover struck work, we're not talking about any TV series featuring famous works, adaptations of famous poets. Instead, we're talking about the original goddamn works. That's right, folks. It's the Edgar Allan Poems special. Edgar Allan Poe, local Bostonian Edgar Allan Poe, an American writer and poet.
Love that.
Born in 1809 in Boston, Massachusetts, is a central figure of Romanticism and Gothic fiction. He had a great mustache. He wrote a poem about a raven that got a great Simpsons parody, and he wrote a lot of poems about weird shit that happened around Boston. That's a true thing. There is a statue of Edgar Allan Poe outside of my old office.
Yeah, we've been there. I remember that.
I remember when it was built. I was in college, and my professor I was actually doing Boston writers class in senior year, and she was like, "If you take a picture outside in front of the Edgar Allan Poe statue, I'll give you extra credit." And I like took the train into the city to go to that statue for the extra credit. That was also the class where she gave us the keys. So great, shout out to that professor. And that's where I kind of like fell in love with Edgar Allan Poe. I also took a Gothic fiction course in that year. And so I was like, we got to do some Poe stuff. I want to do it in a creative way. I don't just want to like read poems to the people, because I know some people like that, but our analysis and our comedy criticism can be kind of like the sell for most people. So let's read Edgar Allan Poe and talk about it. So that's my background. Before we get into what we read this week, what is your background with the thespian himself?
I've been a longtime fan of Edgar Allan Poe. I gotta imagine that my introduction to him was either in English class or the first Treehouse of Horror episode. It was probably the first Treehouse of Horror episode where Homer is like doing the Raven, and Bart is the Raven.
Don't I crispy, shorn, and shaven, thou?
I said,
But sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the nice Plutonian shore.
quoth the Raven.
Eat my shorts. Bart, stop it.
It's so good.
And I think as a kid, it was something that like there's not a much of a joke there because they're pretty much doing the Raven word for word with some minor tweaks, but kind of just setting it to animation. But there was just something about it as a kid where I was like, what is this? Why is this episode like this? I'm so fascinated to know way more about it. And I really glommed onto whenever we would read Poe stuff in English class. And I remember when I was in 8th grade, my 8th grade English class did this strange thing where every month we had to read an outside reading book of our choice. And at the end of the month, everybody had to get up in front of the class and recite a poem that they had memorized. It's just such an odd, like, holdover from education practices that predated when we were in high school and were like things that were probably institutionalized in our public school system from way earlier. This focus on like recitation, because then also when we were in 9th grade, we had to memorize and recite the Mark Antony speech from Julius Caesar.
Yes, we did.
Which is like a weird thing. And you remember our 9th grade English teacher had to stay after school for like weeks to hear all of these 9th graders come in and recite Friends, Romans, Countrymen, which I think I would pull my hair out if I had to do that as a teacher.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so we had to memorize a poem every month, and I think the stipulation was like it had to be at least 10 lines long. So imagine like little, how old are you in 8th grade? Like 13 or whatever.
Yeah.
Little 13-year-old me doing monthly installments of The Raven. Like, okay, let me pick up where I left off last month. Or like 1 month doing Annabelle Lee or, things like that. And yeah, I was just really into Poe. And then in high school, I refined my taste and I got really into H.P. Lovecraft in 10th grade.
Yeah.
I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek because H.P. Lovecraft obviously was a pretty racist dude, but also wrote some wild, cool shit. So, take that with a grain of salt, I guess.
Don't ever look up what he named his cat.
No.
Don't do that.
Don't read the story where his cat is featured in it.
Oof.
Yeah. Anyway. So, yeah, I was a very, I was not goth, but I was gothic, was kind of my thing.
Sure.
In middle school, early high school. So, big Poe fan.
Yeah, there's just something, undeniably appealing about his way of writing. I think he kind of got pigeonholed in, young academic crit as the goth guy, the dark scary guy, and we're narrowing it down and reading him for Halloween, but I mean Poe was just a writer who wrote to live, right? The dude did gothic work, he did a lot of famous detective fiction, he pioneered that genre in a big way. He did romance and gothic writing, or romantic and gothic writing, intertwined for a long time there, and are still inexorably linked to each other. And he was working on both, man. I mean, he's a fascinating guy. He lived a fascinating life. We're not here to talk about the life and death of Edgar Allan Poe, but I do encourage people to read up on him if you're curious about who the guy is that wrote all this stuff we're talking about. But we each have our favorites. So before last thing, I just want to know, is the thing that you read this week for your own homework, is this your favorite Edgar Allan Poe story or poem, or do you have another one that's your favorite?
That's tough. I mean, I specifically went out of my way to read something that I hadn't read before.
Same.
And upon reading it, I was like, wait, maybe I have read this before, like
Same.
decades ago. I really liked it. I mean, I have a place in my heart for, like the Telltale Heart and the Raven and Annabelle Lee, like the classics, Fall of the House of Usher and that sort of stuff. So it's the fun thing about Poe is like I don't feel like I need to have a favorite, because it's all just kind of spooky and silly and fun. So
yeah,
I kind of want to keep it all in one big pile.
that's fair. I used to say that Usher was my favorite because it has allegories, but in reading about my homework this week, I learned that Edgar Allan Poe really doesn't like it when people try to read allegories into his work, or didn't like it when people tried to read allegories into his work. Like he specifically pushed back against the idea that the work has to be symbolic of something else, which is so interesting. And I'm going to come back to that in my half of this episode. But before we talk about our separate homework, we read a poem. The two of us read the same poem, and we're going to talk about it. It's The Haunted Palace. So one of my goals, I think, with this episode was to not only discuss the works, but to attempt in a modern Chatzable format, like summarize them to each other. So to kick things off, do you want to try to like just off the cuff? Because I know you said you didn't take any notes. Can you just like give me a quick summary of The Haunted Palace?
I mean, it's short enough that we could just read it.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, if you're interested in that.
Yeah, this one could definitely be read. Why not? It's a fun one. It's a good read.
Okay. Do you want to like go back and forth stanza by stanza?
Yeah, stanza is perfect.
Okay. So I'll do the first one, and then you'll do the second, and we'll trade off like that.
Sure. And I'll make sure you throw some very good music under this.
Okay. The Haunted Palace by Edgar Allan Poe. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion, it stood there. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric half so fair.
Banners yellow, glorious, golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden time long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in that sweet day, along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away.
Wanderers in that happy valley through two luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law, round about a throne where sitting Porphyrogene, in state his glory well befitting the ruler of the realm was seen.
And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, and sparkling evermore a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing, in voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king.
But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never morrow shall dawn upon him desolate, and round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed.
And travelers now within that valley, through the red litten windows see vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody, while, like a ghastly rapid river, through the pale door, a hideous throng rush out forever, and laugh, but smile no more. Chills. Straight chills. Had you read this one before?
No, I don't think I'd recognize this one.
Me neither. It's so cool that this guy just keeps having works. I can still, in my adult life, be like, that's a whole new sense of horror and existential dread I did not experience until today. That's great. What do you think The Haunted Palace is about? Besides the Haunted Palace, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's hard to exactly pinpoint it. I mean, you've got this conversation about like a very sort of idyllic sanctuary in the monarch thought's dominion, that feels important. We're capitalizing the word thought in the first stanza. And
suggesting that it used to in the monarch, like in thought, not in reality. That's how I read that.
Interesting. Once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace reared its head, in the monarch thought's dominion. It stood there, never sare spread opinion over fabric half so far. Yeah, I could see that. Like, it's an imagined place.
Or it's a formerly great place.
Right. And then there are these echoes that sing about the wit and wisdom of the king, which seems to continue to paint this image of like an idyllic place, but also something about them being echoes. Seems to imply a king who like isn't aware of his own flaws, and that maybe ends up being his undoing. It seems like the king is thought in the monarch thought's dominion. So maybe thought is like feeding back on itself with echoes, and then like kind of doesn't see its own doom coming. So I don't know. I kind of read it as like this almost like solipsistic worldview in the beginning that is essentially like falling to the, I don't know, sorrows and realities of the world around it. But it's also just kind of a catchy, like creepy-ish story, which is fun.
Of course,
did you have a take on it?
That's the versatility of poetry, right? It is both a like cool coupled vibe with like a beginning and like a two halves, and it is whatever you want to read into it. That's like the fun thing about this. So I kind of read it very straightforward. This is a place that used to be beautiful, and everybody remembered it, and it left behind a sort of energy that was memorable and wonderful and incomprehensible. And then over time it decayed, and evil things and robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. It eventually becomes a place that is horrible and decrepit and scary and broken. Which, I mean, if I'm going to English class this, which is exactly what I'm going to do, I think a lot of people read Poe's work as being about death. I think it's easy to read this as being about aging. What was once there is no longer there. Where the Haunted Palace like really like works for me though is thinking about it as like spaces in our lives. Like, I remember 10 or so years ago visiting my childhood home and getting really emotional about how things changed. And I think this is like the fundamental fear of going back to something old, is that it's it's no longer the thing it used to be. And it's like, well, what happened? Time happened. There's no implication that the dancers and the travelers and the people that come out of this house are bad. It's just that they've been there for so long. And so for you to open the door and be like, oh wow, there's a lot of corruption inside of here and evil. It's just kind of what happens to spaces over time. I mean, like, what is a mansion or what is a haunted house but a mansion with plus time, and minus people. So where there was once life, there is now this. I think that's why it starts with In the Greenest of Our Valleys and ends with the like deeply unsettling line, and laugh but smile no more. So like there's still life in there. It's just not smart. There's no like happiness. There's no more joy in it, which is fucking creepy as heck, man. I don't know. I got to I found a reading of this one and my short story by Christopher Lee, the actor.
Oh, very cool.
Highly recommend for any of the Poe stuff to just go on YouTube and look up like people reading them. There's a lot of like famous writers and actors reading them. He brings this like stateliness to it that I freaking love. Never seraph spread opinion over fabric half so fair. And it's like, that's the good part. That's supposed to be like the nice part of the poem. I don't know. I've never read a poem that feels like decay the way that this one does.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, there's this sense whenever Poe is describing something in this kind of like idyllic language that things are about to go horribly wrong. It like makes you feel uneasy. That he's saying, boy, this place is pretty radiant, and you say, okay, how are you gonna
Okay.
freak me out right now? I'm reading some analyses, just like skimming around Google, that this is like a depression metaphor, basically.
Sure.
That the palace is like one's own mind or inner life, and it's the story of kind of like losing the grip on one's own mind, or there's like different interpretations. It's depression, it's like instability of your mind, whatever. But this feeling that because people are pointing out what are some
The red
examples?
lit windows.
Yeah, like pearl and ruby by the door, so that's like your teeth and your tongue, the pearl and the ruby, for example. Two luminous windows, right? So it's like, okay. Yeah.
Well, and at the end, red lit windows, like you are, having red eyes, is suggesting that you've been crying or that there is a sorrow there. Vast. I love this part. When you think about that and then you read this line, vast forms that move fantastically to a discordant melody. Like there is somebody home, but they're not, like lights on, but nobody's home, kind of. There's just that can often be what I think depression feels like to some people, is that the body is moving and the house still exists and there's still people inside of it, but I smile no more. There's just not the happy part. The good part is not there anymore.
Yeah.
And it doesn't value judge it either. It's just like, yeah, this is the house. It's sad now. It didn't used to be like this.
Yeah. Something I really loved about this is I think Edgar Allan Poe is a great person to read if you want to learn about meter and how different metrical feet and metrical choices can help to like further the story you're trying to tell in a poem.
Right.
Because he like builds his own forms out of different meters. I think there's a reason that like the Raven is so catchy, and it's because it has this like driving rhythm that makes you expect that there's going to be a resolution, and then it's like, quoth the Raven, nevermore. There's something about the way that builds and then kind of dissipates.
Right.
Or Annabelle Lee having this almost like sing-songy sea chanty vibe to it. And what I love about the Haunted Palace is it feels like it has this like very classic structure of A B C D rhyme scheme, and it has metrical lines that are roughly equal in length. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. But then in each one, the sixth line is this oddly short line. So it embeds in every single stanza this feeling of like, oh, something just went wrong. That felt weird. Anyway, back to the rhythm, but it happens every stanza. And so you're primed even from the first stanza with this description of how peaceful everything is to feel unnerved because the rhythm is being broken. Yeah. And that's just like such a cool, interesting musical choice that I really loved in this one.
To that point, what stanza is it where you think that things start to break bad? I'm curious.
I mean, I think like the first one immediately, when the shortest line is "it stood there," you're like, oh, it's not standing there for long. Oh no. And the way that he's drawing attention to the content of those lines, the second stanza, in that sweet day. Oy, okay.
Oy, what's going on?
Yeah. I think probably the stanza, through two luminous when I saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. I think it's probably the fourth stanza where we start to bring in the echoes that to me is the kind of source of what goes wrong. The kind of like inner conversation that doesn't quite warn the monarch of what he needs to be warned of, or distracts him, or whatever it is. That to me is like kind of the source of the downfall. But
yeah. So like the first time I read it, I was like, obviously it's but evil things in robes of sorrow, the second to last. That's like where it's fully just saying things have gone bad. But every reread, I think about the first time I was reading through it, and I got to third stanza, wonders in that happy valley through two luminous windows. You're like, okay, there's like light coming through here, spirits moving musically. That's good. To a lute's well-tuned law. Okay, it's music. Round about a throne, we're sitting. And they could have just said like the king, but they instead decided to say Porphyrogene, which, imply born into the purple, born of purple, royalty, which is like a deliberate word choice to be like the king, the concept of royalty, not like the once and future only king, but like the concept of a king, if that makes sense. I just love the choice to switch to metaphor there. Instead of to describe a actual house that we are looking at, it's like there's like concepts in there. I know that's like weird to say because it's poetry and this full of concepts, but like this choice to switch to metaphor there is very unsettling to me. I'm like, why is it not? Is it a real guy? What's going on? Is he there? The ruler of the realm was seen. Okay, but that's him, right?
Yeah.
And then the repetition, flowing. I love that stuff. This guy loves the word evermore. No, what's better than the word evermore? Even Taylor Swift understood that. It's a good poem, man.
Yeah,
it's a banger.
Should we talk about the stories that we read?
I would love to. I'd be positively touched.
Okay, tell me. I want to hear about yours.
You got it, big man. So that was so flirtatious. I'm gonna lean into it harder. I read The Mask of the Red Death, folks. So, short story, 1842, Prince Prospero's attempt to avoid a dangerous plague. So here's my attempt. Here's my like modern day text summary of The Mask of the Red Death that I took notes on. So, there's a really, really bad plague, and it's called the Red Death. It sucks. It ruins your life. It kills you in about 30 minutes. Keep that in mind.
Oh, shit. Okay.
It sucks.
Okay.
We got our dude, our main character, our Chad. His name is Prince Prospero. And such a G. He's got a huge castle. And he's so rich. And he's like, Red Death, not a problem. I'm going to invite all my cool rich friends. And we're all going to have the wildest party ever. And this Red Death plague shit is going to pass us right by. In fact, just to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and lock my house down and seal the castle. And you're all going to be safe in here. It's not even going to be an issue. This works out fine for some reason. Months upon months of partying and sex and drinking and debauchery and everything. 6 months go by and he says, we've been doing this for a while. I think let's make a big event out of it. I'm going to throw a masked ball. Now, I didn't mention this to you before, but Prince Prospero's house has an interesting quality to it. And that's that it has 7 rooms. He's holding the party in 7 different rooms. Each room is corresponding to a different color of the rainbow, right? We got all, the blue room, the red room, etc., etc. That is why I sent Magellan a picture of the lighting I used in my room, where I'm in the red room right now. I used my my Philips Hue lights, so I'm currently bathed in red light. So you get the 7 rooms. He turns a different color. There's the black room. We don't have to go down all of them. He doesn't even describe all of them. The important ones are the black room and the blue room. The black room is where the vibes are off. The black room has like a big spooky clock in it, right? Like a tick-tock clock. It's so loud that you can hear the clock in every other room. And you're like, what is going on? This clock is so loud. We are not worried about the Red Death at this point. We are just partying. Everyone's getting crazy. We're doing drugs. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
This big clock. It's fine. There is a little bit of like sadness and melancholy around because we know that the plague exists, but like it's a party. We're not going to worry about it. We're rich people. These things don't happen to rich people. We don't get sick. So everyone ignores the black room. We go around it. When like people go to sneak away to like make out, they still don't go to the black room. The vibes are off. when the hour strikes and that clock goes off, it's so unsettling that everyone stops doing what they're doing. They're like, no more dancing, no more like twerking, no more kissing, nothing. It's weird. This clock strikes, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. This continues for 11 hours. It's a great night. The clock strikes midnight. The longest stretch of clock striking that it could possibly be. 12 strikes. At this point, a new guy enters the room. Wait a minute. Why is there a new guy? Don't we know all the guys in the house? Is this even a guy? He's wearing a mask. It's a masquerade ball, though, so this is probably fine. It's we love a masked homie. However, this masked fella is wearing a red mask, and his energy is like really off. Like, how somebody like comes to a party and they like try to invest themselves into every different social group, and they try to like be in the clique, but they just don't get the sort of energy, and they're like weird. This is that guy. He's like asking people like, where did you go to college? Oh, my sister's cousin's third brother went there. And you're like, I don't really care about you. You're really weird. I wish you would leave, actually. Nobody remembers inviting him. He's like really tall and lanky, and he's covered in what the poem describes as the short story describes as the habiliments of the grave. So like goth vibes. It's okay. We love having goths at our party. Prince Prospero's not against that necessarily. His clothes, though, are not only very goth, but they're like bright red. And he looks sick. Like, you can kind of see around the mask, and you're like, this guy looks sallow. He's like coughing.
Oh, you're supposed to be social distancing.
Yeah, there's no so. Keep that in mind. Keep what you just said in mind, please. People are like, does this guy seriously have the Red Death? Did we seriously invite somebody with the fucking Red Death to Prince Prospero's party? Are you shitting me? Prospero is in the middle of like, beer funneling, turns around, someone's like, who invited this guy? And he's like, what the fuck is going on? Dude is pissed off. He's in the blue chamber when he says this, when he realizes all this. Blue chamber, we start to realize maybe where, it's the beer funnel, it's where Prospero hangs out. It's kind of like the cool kids room. He's so mad he has the figure seized. He sends all of his guards. He says, guys, boys, get him out of here. I don't want to see him. I'm pissed off. I don't even want to look at him. He does get a look at him. He says, can you take your mask off? I don't want to see you. Who even invited you? Who are you? Yeah. The dude takes the mask off. John, who do you think is under the mask?
It's probably going to be like Jack the Ripper, or like I don't know.
It's the Red Death itself.
That's kind of what I figured. That's awesome.
It's actually it's the embodiment of the disease. Prospero stares at it and dies from fear. He doesn't die of the Red Death. He's so
Did Edgar Allan Poe write every good story?
Kind of, yes. He's like Padme. He dies of a broken heart. He's like, the party's ruined. No one's happy.
Oh my god, that's awesome.
Everybody else in the party realizes that the Red Death is here. All of them drop dead. Nobody's left alive at the end of this except the Red Death, which comes for everyone. So, that's the mask of the Red Death. I
so wish that Edgar Allan Poe could have lived in the modern day so that he could be medicated and play Dungeons and Dragons, because my guy would have thrived.
You'd be so good. You're like, so you go into a cave, and he's like, how does the cave smell? You're like, what? He's like, how does the cave smell? Edgar. Does it remind me of my dead wife? You're like, no, Edgar, seriously? So the Mask of the... Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Mask of the Red Death is about a lot of things. It's about a plague. It's about the Black Death. Edgar Allan Poe's wife had I think she actually had the Black Plague at the time that he wrote this. But again...
It was what's it called?
Cholera?
No.
Tuberculosis?
Tuberculosis. Yeah.
Tuberculosis. Sorry, Black Death is hundreds of years earlier.
I think he had multiple people in his life die of tuberculosis.
Yeah, so it's on his mind. But he tells people this isn't about tuberculosis. It's about the Red Death. in modern day, people like to read. People totally. There was an article.
The COVID thing.
Slate.com's article, "The Rich Can't Hide from a Plague. Just Ask Edgar Allan Poe." Maya Phillips, March 26, 2020. This comparison has been made. The isolated framing of an emergency, the close quarters perspective, the rich trying to avoid something and leaving it to the poor to die, the fact that it comes for everyone, that one person can infect an entire population. It's all there. I'm curious how you read The Mask of the Red Death, even just from my summary. Like, what's the vibe that you get, or what do you feel like it's about?
Well, first of all, reading this or hearing you describe that and reading the one that I read, I feel like Patrick McGoohan must have been a huge Edgar Allan Poe fan, because for some reason I'm getting major Prisoner vibes.
Yeah.
And just like
masquerades,
Yeah, and just the kind of like grounded, scary, but also a little allegorical approach to like the characters in the ensemble and how they're engaging with each other. And yeah, it seems like it's about like you're saying, this feeling of living at a time where there's this specter looming over you that like you can't put a face to, and trying to go through the process of putting a face to this disease, and like that being almost a fruitless endeavor. Like it feels like kind of a personal meditation in some ways, of there's this phenomenon that's wreaking havoc on my life that is not a person, that I can't like personify and demonize, and I want to try to, and I want to understand what that thing would go out and do, and what kind of terror it might inflict upon people. But at the end of the day, like, it's not something that we can really know or see entirely, and hear all the emotions that kind of go along with its existence and proximity.
Exactly. It's the unknown. This is like the H.P. Lovecraft thing, right? It's the fear of the thing that you don't understand.
Right.
And I think that's what I like about it, is that you're constantly, when reading Mask of the Red Death, going like, okay, like that's weird. What's going on with the room? And we need to get away from it. And like, I think we're good, but why would I be reading this if we were good? Oh, I guess we're never good. We never, all these attempts to hide ourselves were useless. I just think it's really powerful. And in terms of like my read of it, I also think about it as like, yeah, trying to escape death. The rich think that they've conquered death through drugs and ignorance and, weight loss pills and shit like that. It's like, oh, death doesn't come for me. I'm a rich person. And it's like, well, we all decay. We all melt, just like the haunted palace. It comes for all of us. So this is like, that was the through line for me, was like, you just can't try to avoid it. Yeah, it has to happen naturally.
Yeah. I think also for me, like, part of what appealed to me as a teenager about Poe and about Lovecraft, as someone who like was an atheist with a lot of death anxiety, it was like kind of an existentially scary headspace to be in. And with stories like this, I think there's almost a comfort in doom to a certain extent. Right. Like, no matter what like, your susceptibility to this disease is not a product of your station in life, because everybody is claimed by this disease. And so let's depict this scenario in which the people who are guarding themselves with the most means, who are the most conniving and most capable of escaping it, fail and fall to it. There's a comfort in that, of like, we live in a world where we can't change the fact that the Red Death is going to come for us. And so like, that existential horror, that doom, is a kind of like balm for the anxious soul in a way. Like, it's a very, roundabout, backwards thing. But I think for me, when I was 14, like that kind of thinking made a lot of sense. And I think probably if I was reading that story and we had experienced COVID when we were in middle school or high school, I think it might have brought me some comfort in that regard, funnily enough.
Oh, absolutely. I also find the ending of this story weirdly comforting, not just because rich people die, but also, like, I've, in the last couple of years, and I think it's COVID's fault, but I've become somewhat obsessed with stories about endings, about apocalypses, and what we do after, how we recover from them. And so the, like, way I would if I was in Mask of the Red Death, I would simply not die. It's like, I would just accept that I'm going to. And if I don't, then I live on and build with the people who survive it. But most people probably won't. This seems to be a 100% fatal disease. So it is about the end of the world. We've never had a 100% fatal disease in our lifetime. So I just think that's like, there is something comforting about, like, oh, why hide yourself? Why lock yourself in a tomb like this and try to close your ears to it when you can embrace it and accept that it's going to happen? There's something beautiful about that. My last point is, I just think that's like something I love about Poe's work is, no matter how bleak and depressing things get, there is a, like, catharsis at the end of each of his stories. Even the Haunted Palace is like, nobody smiles anymore. It's like, oh, it's done. The past is the past, and now we're in a different state of things. And the Mask of the Red Death is like, and not a single person survived except for the Red Death, because the Red Death lives on. It's like, yeah, it's over. We're telling you it's over. Get used to it. Anyways, awesome short story. So glad I read it. It's also like another one of those, like, oh, I've seen this basically adapted 1,000 times. Like, what are we doing? What short story did you read for us this week, Miguel?
I read The Cask of Amontillado, and I'll tell you the story about it. It's
Gay.
You said gay?
Sorry, I said yay, but now I retroactively said gay. Yay, I'm settling in, and I'm excited for you to tell me a story, is what I meant to say. Go ahead.
I'm going to give you a different title. This one's called The Barrel of Wine. It's about two friends. It's about two friends who have fun at a carnival. They put on a funny hat, and then they go downstairs looking for some wine to drink together. They can't quite find it, but they have a really long sleepover. The end.
Oh.
It's really nice. Now let me tell you the other version. The Cask of Amontillado. So, essentially, we have our protagonist, who goes by his last name, Montresor. And Montresor is narrating the story from a first-person perspective. The first paragraph, he's bringing you into the story in the middle of it by telling you about the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato. So Fortunato is his, like, rival or something, social rival, it seems like. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. That's the first sentence of this story.
Oh my God.
This second sentence, you who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. So, first sentence, he's like, I fucking hate this guy Fortunato. Second sentence, and look, you know me. I'm not just gonna, like, emptily threaten someone. If I want to kill somebody, I'm gonna do it. Third sentence, I wasn't quite sure how I was gonna do it, but I was pretty sure however I did it, it was going to get done without any mistakes being made. So you're in the mind of this murderer from the get-go, and it's so fascinating, like, as a study of the position that you can put a reader in by having an unreliable first-person narrator.
Mm-hmm.
Within 3 sentences, you're just saying, okay, the narrator hates this one guy. He thinks you're his friend, reader. He's talking to you, and he's, like, going to divulge how he's going to go about killing this guy. So I loved that immediately. And then his plan is basically like, the thing he knows about Fortunato is that the dude loves wine.
Okay.
Or at least he prides himself on what he knows about wine. That should be said. He might not necessarily love it, but he knows a lot about it and always wants to kind of demonstrate his understanding of wine. So the two of them end up at like this carnival party. And imagine throughout this whole story that Fortunato is wearing one of those jester's hats that has the jingly bells on the end of it.
Yeah.
Which is like, and he has like striped clothing on. So he's essentially in like a jester costume. This story is very funny. I should be clear. This is like a comedy story. So Montresor meets up with Fortunato at the carnival party, and he says, bro, I got a ton of Amontillado wine. I think it's good. I think it was real, but I didn't check to see if it was authentic.
Oh.
Like, could you help me out? And Fortunato's like, Amontillado? What? And the narrator says, I have my doubts. Amontillado? I have my doubts. Like, the narrator just keeps kind of echoing back things that Fortunato's saying or repeating himself over and over again to lull Fortunato into this scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other really funny thing that happens is he keeps mentioning like, oh, but if you're too busy to assess my wine, I could go talk to Lucchesi about it. And Fortunato's like, Lucchesi?
Damn.
That guy can't tell Amontillado from Sherry. Like, you don't want to talk to that guy. And every step of the way, as he's like luring Fortunato into his lair, he keeps being like, look, you don't have to do this. I could just go talk to Lucchesi. That would be fine.
Yeah.
And Fortunato's like, no. Come on, man. So they descend into these catacombs that are lined with this sediment that is formed from the fact that just above the catacombs is a river. So there's a lot of water like dripping through the ceiling and forming these like crystalline, salty sediments that are essentially the solid version of potassium nitrate. And it's agitating Fortunato's cough. So he's like coughing heavily throughout as they descend lower and lower. And Montresor's like, no, we can turn back. You're coughing. I'll just go talk to Lucchesi.
And he says
Fortunato
to someone
says,
like,
no.
Didn't he say somewhere? Sorry to interrupt you. You're
No, it's
on
okay.
fire. So at one point he's like, nobody dies from a cough, dude. You're fine. Like, don't, or, like,
Yeah,
I wouldn't die
yeah.
from a cough. Love that.
Right, exactly. But like, yeah, he says, Fortunato says, enough. He said, the cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough. Man, we'll see. So they drink like a little medicine on the way down. Fortunato says, these vaults are extensive. And they're kind of making idle chit chat. At one point, Fortunato asks Montresor about, he's like, I forgot what your family motto and crest are. And the motto is Nemo me impune lacessit, which translates from Latin into no one provokes me with impunity. And Fortunato's like, cool,
Based.
okay. Clearly did not understand what that meant. Yeah, so they keep kind of going along in that fashion. And what's interesting is as they're going through this walk, at the beginning of the story, you're thinking, okay, this narrator is off his rocker. Like something's wrong here and he's going to kill this guy for no reason. And then there's just this long walk through the catacombs where Fortunato keeps being really annoying. And you're like, I kind of am okay with this guy getting murdered. I got to be honest. Like, he's a bit of a dick. Like, he's pompous. He thinks that he knows everything. He's dismissive. Obviously, murder is not the answer, but you can start to understand why the narrator has a distaste for this guy. And I read up a little bit about some interpretations of this, and some people were thinking maybe this is Poe, getting out his frustrations about his literary rivals who he thinks don't take the work seriously, or like literary critics who feel like they kind of know everything about stories and actually aren't, true artists or whatever. So it's one of those stories where you can kind of just graft onto this guy, whoever it is that you have a distaste for, and be like, oh, I know exactly that type of guy, and he's about to get casked in the Amontillado or whatever. So we go deeper and deeper. There's this funny exchange where Fortunato does this thing to see if Montresor is a Freemason, and then Montresor takes out like a little trowel to be like, yeah, I'm a Mason, but that's like the tool of a stonemason. So he's kind of mocking Fortunato for being a Mason. Anyway, that's kind of like a niche 1840s joke, but it still hits, I think.
Sure.
And that trowel is the Chekhov's gun here, because when we finally get to the last room of the catacombs, Fortunato is super drunk and he's starting to get sicker and sicker from all the like sediment around the area. And so Montresor just starts building a brick wall and walling him in to this room at the end of the catacombs. And it takes a long time to build it. It's like a slow, methodical process of fully building a brick wall. He had set up all the bricks ahead of time to be ready for himself to build this thing. And there's this amazing paragraph where it starts talking about how Fortunato is like screaming in terror because he's chained up at this point.
Right.
He's screaming in terror. And I just want to read this paragraph. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. So there's just this terrifying moment where he's like, shit, this dude is screaming a lot. I should probably just murder him with my sword. And then he says, no, I'm actually just going to scream back at him louder and keep building the wall. It's so good.
Unhinged.
Oh my God. And then he's about to place the last brick. And Fortunato's like, okay, haha, very funny. We're done now, right? And Montresor says, yeah, totally. Anyway, just going to put in this last brick. And before he puts the last brick in, he's calling out to Fortunato because he doesn't hear him anymore. And there came forth in return only a jingling of the bells. So his little hat as he like falls and thuds against the ground, and then he places the last brick, and that's that. And it ends with "May he rest in peace" in Latin, which is just again like this tongue-in-cheek little punchline. So yeah, I loved it. It's such a great showcase of like narrator voice and getting the reader to side with a character that is utterly distasteful. It's so funny and creepy. It's great.
I love that. I love the first person narrative. We don't get a lot of that with Poe. And when we do, it's very fun. Also, just there's nothing more metal than getting revenge on somebody by building building them into the walls of a wine cask, of a wine house.
Yeah.
That's incredibly hardcore. Any like that one seems like pretty straightforward. Like there's enough plot there that I'm like, that's about what it's about. But did you get anything in actually reading it beyond revenge can kind of be cool sometimes?
I mean, there's also like it seems like more specific biographical stuff that maybe Poe is calling out a specific writing rival who he had a feud with.
Yeah.
Named what's it? Thomas Dunn English.
Oh.
So I guess Tom has done some English, and Edgar Allan Poe didn't like it so much. Anyway. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's kind of what I get from it is essentially, how do you get inside the mind of a murderer and like present what they're doing? Like, this is a horrifically premeditated act, right?
Yes.
Like, this is not a crime of passion. And part of it is about this character being motivated by like the loss of status, because there's this implication that Fortunato like insulted his family name and stuff. And so I think what's really interesting is like getting fully into the mind of someone who has like grievances that many people probably have about like feeling slighted or wronged or displaced, and taking that to the full logical extreme of, you know, how far can your empathy go for someone who's feeling slighted and frustrated when the story is constructed in such a way that it's like fully immersed in their perspective, not to justify what they're doing, but almost as like a literary exercise of like, what does it take? What is this narrator? What can the narrator show you fully? Like, he can show you fully and completely building a brick wall to get a guy, to suffocate to death or whatever.
Right.
And what are the things that the narrator has to gloss over in order to keep you on his side? How far does like him being funny go in winning you over and like softening this story? So to me, it's like really a exercise in craft more than it is an exercise in like thematic exploration.
I see.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed it for that reason.
That's a wonderful contrast then to Red Death, which is like, what do you read into this? And I got to admit, like, even reading Red Death, I was like, this is a hard thing to communicate over, a summary, but like the build is really fantastic, and also I believe Red Death is, I forget who the perspective is from exactly, but I know it's first person because there's the like, first let me tell of the rooms in which the party was held. So it might be from Prosper's perspective, but that all goes to say, like, Amontillado is Poe being like getting into the mind of a character and letting you understand it and being like, here's why I did it. Here's what I did, and here's why I did it. There's no mystery. And again, reminding the listener here, Poe was also a guy who wrote detective stories, and he was never the type of person to write like a straightforward and the guy who you thought did it. The murder in the Rue Morgue, most classic example of it's not the person you think it is. It's not even close to the person you think it is. Are you familiar with Rue Morgue?
A little bit, yeah.
Are you familiar with who the killer is in that one?
No, I don't believe so.
Do you mind if I spoil it for you?
Go ahead, that's fine.
So this is a classic. This is actually one that I read in a detective fiction class. But Murders in the Rue Morgue is a detective fiction. It's considered first modern detective story. There's Auguste Dupin, who's also like a character that comes up in other stories. He's a man in Paris who solves the brutal murder of two women who hurt a suspect, but nobody in the suspect list can agree on what language was being spoken. So it's but they know that all the doors to the house where the murder took place were locked, and everybody in the place has a justification for not being them. Who does it end up being? Well, there was a zoo nearby, and a gorilla got out, and the gorilla killed the woman.
Oh, I think I did know that.
Yeah. This is the like one where it's the monkey.
Oh my god,
it's fucking wild, and it's so good.
Edgar Allan Poe.
He's so cool, and it's the thing you're talking about with Amontillado, where it's like I'm not trying to hide from you what I did. I'm actually going to tell you what I did. And how I did it and why I did it. And that's going to end with me being like, rest in peace, fucker. See ya, loser. I just think that's really neat and fun.
Yeah.
This is the thing, right? Like, it's horror and it's creepy, and this is why I think people who maybe have more of an aversion to horror and thriller stuff, whether it's in other media even, can kind of think about it the way that we talk about Poe, where it's like they're doing something here. They're scaring you, and that's a big part of it. And I understand that if you're easily like unsettled by seeing these things in video or in text or in audio, then I get why you're pushed away from it. But like, there's a creativity to good horror that Poe absolutely nails, and a ton of modern stuff nails. That is enjoyable, even if and often because you are scared. But I don't think Casa Amontillado is scary. I think it's just like fascinating getting the mind of that guy.
Right. I think he's just so good at like dread, specifically. Yeah. What's going to happen? This is going to go bad. Oh my God, we're walking down this hallway for a long time. Like the whole story is essentially just a oneer of you're following these two guys walk for 5 minutes or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Stellar stuff. I think that's what I got. Any final notes on the Edgar Allan Poe special?
No, let us know what your fave Poe stuff is.
Poems, short stories, literature, whatever.
Yeah, go listen to all the MC Lars Edgar Allan Poe songs, I guess. I don't know if those are still good, but I liked those.
Oh my God, MC Lars is a name I have not heard in so long. The Edgar Allan Poe EP released in June 2012.
Yep.
Crusty.
I remember really liking that in June 2012. Or 2014 or whenever I actually listened.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, we have to do a whole episode of MC Lars someday. We really have to. Oh God. Fellow Stanford graduate?
Yep. He talks about Stanford in one of those songs, I think.
Yes, he does. Anyways, Magellan, it's your turn. I'm going to hand you this pickle. What is your pickle for next week?
Okay. So I kind of want to do like a triptych thing. So like a 3-part study.
Okay.
So Arthur reminded me in a suggestion that he made in the Discord of something I really enjoyed doing when I was in college, which was for like, I don't know, 2 weeks or something, but it stuck with me. I would watch these like David Attenborough bird documentaries, but I would put them on mute and I would play music and just kind of wait and see if anything synced up or like worked. And there was no like mind altering substances involved, by the way. This was just kind of a thing that I wanted to do.
Again, Magellan's the most stoner, non-stoner ever.
Yeah. I've never once in my life smoked a weed, but I think I've gotten, the experience without having to do that. Anyway, so here's what I'm thinking. I want us for one of the 3 things to make a Okay. Here's the triptych. One of the 3 things, I want us to do that, where I'll give you some kind of video. I'll find a video, make sure it's not struck work, where it's like birds. Yeah. And I want you to make a playlist to go along with it. So let's say that you should make a playlist that's roughly like an hour long. So that probably works out to like 20 something songs or so.
Okay.
And just songs that make you feel like a bird. Whatever that means to you, and like try to capture a variety of moods and genres.
But like improv class, there's no wrong answers. So that's one thing. Second thing is I want us to listen for the next week, starting tomorrow, to the podcast Bird Note Daily, which is a 2-minute radio show that comes out every day, and it's just little stories about birds. Okay.
And the third part is I want us to just like take note of the bird vibes in your neck of the woods.
Oh.
And like if you come across any birds over the course of the next week.
Oh, isn't there that app? There's that app.
Oh, let's do an app. Let's do a bird watching app.
No, there's like an app that you can play it audio of a bird chirping. It tells you what bird it is.
Yeah.
Is that cool?
Okay.
Merlin Bird ID by Cornell Labs. Okay. That's
Great.
the one.
Okay. So the 3 things are try to ID at least one bird with the Merlin Bird ID.
Okay.
Listen to a week of the Bird Note Daily podcast.
Okay.
And watch some sort of bird montage video with your bird vibes playlist playing in the background.
Okay, perfect. This
And
is
then
so
we'll
fun.
talk about that triptych of bird vibe experiences next week.
Ooh, this podcast looks wonderful.
Yeah.
Save the
Also-
also immerse yourself in the natural world. Yeah.
Also, I found an article from BirdNote. This is like extra credit if you end up enjoying BirdNote. They have an article called Top 10 Spookiest BirdNote Daily Episodes to Help You Celebrate Halloween.
Oh my god, they're doing great. That's great marketing right there.
So I'm going to link you that. That's optional because this will come out after spooky season. So it's not as relevant anymore.
Ooh, corvids.
But they have one episode called Crows Recognize Individual Faces. So that's pretty cool.
That's so cool. All right, we're gonna get bird. We're gonna bird up. We're gonna watch the bird up sketch from Portlandia. No,
Right.
put a bird on it. Oh no, sorry, I'm mixing 2 things up. There's an Eric Andre thing, which I think is called Bird Up, and then there's the Put a Bird on It, which is the Anyway,
You guys are watching Bird Up.
bird. Caw. Magellan, who does the plugs on this week?
Me, I think. I think you did it last time.
Okay, can you first tell me what you do on the internet?
You can find me on another podcast where I play video games with my friend Justin called Super Smash Echoes. We play video games related to the Super Smash Brothers franchise. Check it out, Super Smash Echoes. I also have some writing on my Substack, notthatmagellan.substack.com. So you can check that out as well. Alan, what about you?
I'm on a lot of podcasts on scanlinemedia.com, including The Creature Corn, which is about monsters, and The Garnet Wager, which is a cacophony of like 5 different genres of podcasts that are all coming back soon. I was also recently on a Scanline Media stream playing GeoGuessr, Azeroth, and Eorzea Edition with 6. So check those out. And every other month you can hear me on Talking Marketing, a bi-monthly marketing chat hangout podcast, which I have been told is good. That's what I got.
Lovely. All right, so let's do the plugs, yeah?
Yeah.
You can get in touch with the show in a few different ways. You can email us at chatspod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, recordings of yourself making bird sounds. I would actually love those a lot. If you could send us those, that would be super helpful for our craft, our art, as I mentioned earlier. You can also follow us on Twitter at ChatzPod. You can DM us. You can XM us there. DX Mario Adventure. Wait, no, Sonic Adventure DX? Mario Adventure DX. Come on now. Anyway, talking to myself at this point. We are Chatz, a television podcast on YouTube, of course. We are also on Apple Podcasts and places like that. Consider rating us there, leaving us reviews. That would be very helpful for the show. If you want to be helpful in other ways, you can send us some money on our Patreon, patreon.com/chatspod. $1 a month and up gets you access to our Discord where we hang out, talk about the shows that we've discussed, talk about other stuff, all the things that we talk about on the Pickles. We talk about Pickles. Well, whatever. There's a lot of discussion happening off the pod in the Cord. Come in here. $3 a month and up gets you access to twice monthly bonus content. We had one episode earlier this month where we had a chat that went in a lot of different directions and then ended up with us taking this like relationship personality quiz that girlfriend of the podcast Amanda crashed the conversation of a bit in a very fun and unexpected way. So that's on the Patreon. And then we are going to be releasing very soon another Patreon episode where we played a kind of micro RPG that is I'm just going to tell you because I want you to enjoy it and come listen to it. It's a micro RPG that is like Carly Rae Jepsen themed cyberpunk heist.
Let's fucking go.
Called Boy Problems. So that's going to be on the Patreon at the end of the month as well. So a lot of good stuff there. $5 a month and up gets you all of that stuff, plus thanked here at the end of the episode. Our $5 and up patrons include Arthur, Emrys, Jen, Justin, Kat, Lee, Marcus, May Louise, Michael, my mom, Pat, Noel, Six, and Stefan. Thank you, folks, for supporting the show. Thank you also to @Camillustrator for creating our podcast art. And, of course, consider supporting the folks who remain on strike with the Entertainment Fund, and also just advocating for those folks as you can. Now, the last thing we want to recommend you do is listen to these Chatsums, and go do them. They're little snacks, little things, snack and pickles that you can chew on between now and next time. Alan, what's your Chatsum for this week?
I've got a double music Chatsum for y'all. I have a song/album that has been stuck in my head since the moment I woke up today until now, and it's still rolling around in my head as I'm talking. And that's the song "If I'm Honest" by Truesdale, which is a trio of women named Georgia, Lauren, and Quinn, who I had not heard of until they signed with the production company that John Bellion runs. And he co-wrote If I'm Honest and a bunch of other songs on their album and co-produced. And it's so catchy and so fun. They have, I'd say the energy is kind of similar to the Chicks and even a little bit of like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Like country adjacent, but not necessarily country. And If I'm Honest, it's just such a freaking earworm. So please listen to it to get it out of my brain and into yours, and listen to the whole album out of my mind for good, like modern country vibe. And then, I have to Chatsum it, and I can't believe I haven't Chatsumed it yet because it came out on the 13th, 10 days ago from this recording. But Metric released Formentera 2, and I'm legally obligated to like it, and I do like it. It is good. It is a follow-up to 2022's Formentera, I believe it was. It's great. It's got some great songs. We're going to cover it in a more in-depth way in the future on the podcast. Next month.
On the Patreon.
On the Patreon. My favorite song on it is Descendants. I'll let you hear why when we get into it.
Nice.
What about you? What are your chats this week?
Okay, I got a few. Obligatory Super Mario Wonder Chatsum. We've both been playing it. It's fun. Do you like 2D Mario?
Yes.
What if 2D Mario, all of the piranha plants started singing to you? That would be pretty good, wouldn't it? That's the game. So that's been fun. The event that I was talking about that I went to at the Nighthawk is called Spoons, Tunes, and Booze. If you ever find yourself in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and you want to go do that, essentially they watch Saturday morning, Sunday morning cartoons, and they have a cereal bar. It was so fun. It was such a fun thing to do. They also have like a monthly After Dark show, I think, at the other Nighthawk location by Prospect Park. So just a delight. They have a lot of online events too, actually. So if you're not a New York person, but you want to hang out with people who are watching random, funny, esoteric cartoons, you should check them out. I think their group is called Secret Formula, so you can find their online shows by searching for that. Okay. And then I went to a friendly local gaming store in Williamsburg called 20-Sided Store, which I recommend. It's a very nice shop. Everyone's super friendly. It's a beautiful space, and they have a lot of great products. I purchased a couple things that I want to recommend. The first is an RPG called Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which is essentially a system that you can use to tell stories of flirty, action-packed queer adventure, and isn't that super fun? So I recommend Thirsty Sword Lesbians. And then also found this, I don't know if it was like a independently published or what, but it was this little pamphlet, beautiful art called Barkeep on the Borderlands. And it's essentially a system agnostic adventure where it sets the heroes in this like medieval city, and you're doing a pub crawl through like 20 different fantasy taverns and bars that all have very different themes. And it has these systems for tracking like how drunk the characters are and how much time has passed over the course of the week. And like the art itself and all the ideas in it makes it worth the price of admission, but it also just seems like a pretty fun and well-designed adventure. So Barkeep on the Borderlands is the other thing I would recommend.
That's one of those concepts where you're like, why didn't this exist before? That's so specifically clever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my god, I love this art. That's so cute. While I was looking stuff up that you were talking about, I found a video of a snake eating its own tail, like in real life, and it's fascinating, but also kind of really gross. I feel sick to my stomach. That's the true meaning of Halloween, is being surprised by an evil snake. And I want to say to you all, as my voice starts to go from nearly 3 hours of podcasting before this, thank you to Magellan for being the Prospero to my Castle of Otranto, because one of us was clearly inspired. And I'll let you figure out who is who. It's because the Haunted Mansion, or a bunch of post stuff was inspired by the Castle of Otranto. That's why. I could have also said that you were the, oh my god, what is it called? The Guide to My Guy? What are the two guys in the thing that you read called?
Montresor and Fortunato.
Yeah, but I don't want one of us to kill the other one. So how about you're the Prospero to my Fortunato, because we've never met in person. And thank you for we don't exist in the same universe. And thank you all for listening to Chatz and a Pickle. Boo! Bye-bye. Happy Halloween.